We are joined now by former National Security Advisor in the Trump administration. There he is, H.R. McMaster, the retired Lieutenant General, is a senior fellow at the Hoover Institution. Good morning to you, General. We're really glad to have your expertise on this day of all days, where the situation appears to be getting more and more dire in Ukraine. As you're watching this play out, and as a former National Security Advisor, what concerns you most as you're watching?
What concerns me, Gayle, is that obviously this is horrible for the Ukrainian people, the humanitarian crisis that we're witnessing already. But what also concerns me is wars like this just don't stay within boundaries, within borders. It's going to bleed over. I mean, if you think about what Putin has just done in recent years, he's enabled the serial episodes of mass homicide in the Syrian civil war. He has used the most heinous weapons on earth to commit mass murder against innocents, including killing hundreds of children at a time. And so this shouldn't surprise us in terms of Russia's brutality. And we have to not assume that this catastrophe that we're seeing is going to remain contained within Ukraine or even really the Black Sea region or Europe.
That's even more terrifying than General, because you hear Zelensky begging for help, and the sanctions clearly aren't working. So what should we do?
Well, we should do everything we can right now that doesn't risk a direct confrontation with the Russians. And so, Gayle, how is it that we have not sanctioned the hydrocarbon sector, right? I mean, 59% of Russia's exports are oil and gas. And of course, we don't want to do that because there are those in Europe who are afraid of disrupting the economy. Well, I mean, there's going to be a lot more disrupted than energy supplies if we don't do everything we can at this moment. And of course, Gayle, we've got to rush all kinds of support that we can to Ukraine. I think the next week is going to be really vital. I mean, this is when Ukrainians could start running out of basic supplies, pharmaceuticals and food. And we also need to support them with more and more defensive capabilities so they can sustain their defensive efforts against the Russians.
General, there's a lot that indicates this is going to get much worse before it gets better. President Zelensky has said a genocide is being carried out. Senator Lindsey Graham got some attention yesterday for saying, quote, the only way this ends is if someone inside Russia takes this guy out. And he's talking about Putin there. What's your reaction to that idea?
Well, I think what we need a Russia that ceases its permanent hostility to Europe and the United States and the free world generally. And so a change in the nature of that government is what we need. Now, how that happens will be up to the Russian people. But I hope that the Russian people are concluding that their future is pretty bleak under Putin. This is somebody who has really victimized his own people. You mentioned this already in terms of how he's just crushed any journalists who had the courage to really criticize the government or to expose his criminality. And then also, he's affected their living standards. I mean, Russian wages have dropped. Real wages have dropped for the last 8 years. The economy has stagnated. His COVID response was terrible. He's a criminal and he's incompetent. And so I think we should be doing everything we can to get through his information controls and get real information to the Russian people. This is where I think journalists are on the front line, right? We see courageous journalists today in Ukraine, but there are courageous journalists in Russia who risk their lives every day. Some of them have been murdered, right? So I think the information dimension of the fight is important, and it's related to what Senator Graham said, is that the Russian people need to get rid of this guy.
But the Russian people aren't getting the real information. That's the problem. We've been showing stories where Russian soldiers think they're coming for a special operation. Then they're crying to their mothers and saying, I want to go home. I had no idea this was a war. The Russian people are being told a totally different story.
I'll tell you, Gayle, if there's a bright side of this, maybe we'll begin to cherish the freedoms that we enjoy in our country, right? I mean, we've been engaged in, I would say, self-flagellation for kind of a long time here. And we have freedom of speech. We have a say in how we're governed. And what we're looking at is a dictatorship. And what happens in a dictatorship where human rights and your say in how you're governed is extinguished. And so, I think that as we look at the bravery, the courage of the Ukrainians, and we look at really the state of affairs in Russia, hey, I hope that this helps us get through the traumas we've been through, in the last several years, and gain more confidence.
General, well said. And it is a stark and very clear reminder of the freedoms we have here and how valuable they really are. General McMaster with peerless expertise on the world stage. Thank you very much, General.